January 19. We know each other now for nearly 3 weeks. Well, I don't know anything about you out there, and you can remedy that by using the comments to say something, tell me what makes you listen maybe, or ask me questions. Making the beginning here, I tell you something from my family history. And I promise you it will lead to insight about information today and what tires us and overwhelms us so much about it. So, the mothers of both of my maternal grandparents were Jewish women married to non-Jewish men in Nazi Germany. This pair of my grandparents, born in 1933 and 1934 respectively, still lives, and I have made it a habit a long time ago to interview them about their rather interesting pasts. But I want to focus here today on my grandfather's mother, Ella. Ella's husband died in April 1944 in a freak bicycle accident. It didn't take long until she got the request to report for deportation to a concentration camp. But then the strangest thing happened. A local SS doctor wrote her a certificate that she wasn't fit for deportation because of all things something with her hands. That problem solved, the next one arrived. How was she to feed herself and her 2 sons? Neither of them was entitled to food ration cards, and she wasn't allowed to work to earn money for the black market. And again, otherwise strict followers of a regime stepped in. A company owner arranged for my great-grandmother for what we call today home office. He arranged for a workplace set up in her living room so she could sue for him. And the local hotel owners told my grandfather and his older brother to show up daily at their back door with a large bowl to pick up a warm meal a day for all 3 of them. It sounds impossible, right? Monsters acting like humans? Now, let's turn to my dad's parents. I had my dad's DNA tested, and he has an almost exclusively Frank heritage. You know, early Middle Ages, Charlemagne, the beginning of France. What is hilarious because my dad's name is Frank. Anyway, his father, Erich, was a convinced Nazi. A Wehrmacht soldier, he was stationed in France at the Channel, where responsibility was a train car-bound rocket launcher from which he fired V-rockets at the UK. Sorry for that, really. Until D-Day, when they had to retreat and finally abandon their rocket launcher when they were moved to the east. Different wides of train tracks, you know. First they got new training at what was called Rügenwalde back then in Pommern. It's today in Poland. But then the whole unit was to go to Breslau. And they would have done that even though it was a lost cause at the time in early 1945. But the officer gave them all fake papers and told them to leave and hide. The group became a motorcycle gang touring through Europe until they thought it was safe to go home. It's equally as strange a story because there were nearly no desertions from the Wehrmacht. Not even in the end. But there is an explanation for both experiences, the same explanation. Morris Janowitz will explain it. I don't think I'm related to him, but stranger things have happened. Janowitz was the son of Jewish immigrants from Poland to the US, like much of my family. At 22, he had just finished a degree in sociology when he was drafted by the US Army and deployed to the Psych Warfare Divisin in London. Their task was it to unravel the mystery of a Nazi mind. And in early 1944, they were faced with a riddle. Why did the Germans like my grandfather continue to fight so hard still? Didn't they realize, despite overwhelming evidence, how heavily the odds were stacked against them? The Eckart's theory was that ideology was to blame. The soldiers were most thoroughly convinced they stood on the higher moral ground, and theirs was the legitimate worldview, the right side of history. So, the division advised the Allies to invest in tens of thousands of leaflets to release over the enemy territory. They argued that the German position was hopeless, the Nazi philosophy despicable, and the Allies' cause justified. It is estimated that 90% of the German forces stationed in Normandy after D-Day, like my grandfather, were exposed to it. Did it make a difference? No. I told you, my grandfather's unit moved through all of Europe to continue fighting at another spot. And they would have died for it, like all the other Wehrmacht soldiers. Why? Janowitz discovered that when interviewing hundreds of prisoners of war after the liberation of Paris, their theory had been all wrong. The reason the soldiers fought had nothing to do with ideology. Even though there were believers in the ranks, like my grandfather, only 5% even mentioned ideas that belonged to Nazism in their interviews. As one soldier said, Nazism began 10 miles behind the lines. Why then did they fight? Kameradschaft, friendship. They didn't want to let their mates down, and for that reason they were ready to act even against their own self-interests. Sometimes truths are almost too painful to accept, but the monsters were also motivated by the good in the humanity, by courage, loyalty, devotion and solidarity. That's what made the Germans also believe in the eradication of Jews, because they fought in some strange ways because of years of telling them that humankind could only be rescued if these not humans were eliminated from the ranks. And that's why my grandfather's unit only deserted when they could do it together. And when the people they left to fight for themselves weren't people they were close to. It's all about empathy, totally abused by the leaders. And that's not the only reason why I am against empathy. You might think of it as a beneficent sun illuminating this world, but research shows us that it is a very finely tuned spotlight that singles out a specific person or group of people in our life. And while you're busy sucking up the emotions bathed in this one tiny ray of light, the rest of the world fades away in darkness. Empathy even causes you to make decisions that are morally deeply questionable, like in this one experiment where people were told about a then 10-year-old in need of an organ transplant, whose time was running out. She wasn't at the top of the list. Participants in the test, confronted only with the facts, said she must wait. As hard as it is, she must wait, because there are other kids. But those participants that were asked to imagine how the girl felt after being presented by the facts, all voted to move her up to the top of the list, even though that was effectively a death sentence for the kids in front of her. But she didn't have empathy for them. She didn't see them. Empathy was also what rescued my great-grandmother. And I'm thankful for that, because she was a known entity to the people involved. Some were even relatives of her late husband, like the SS doctor. But these people couldn't see all the other Jews that needed rescuing maybe even more desperately than Ella in this particular moment. Because empathy is always only a spotlight. It is a hopelessly limited skill reserved for people we can smell, see, hear, touch, feel. For people we can feel with, can feel, make their emotions ours. Family, friends, for other Swifties, or maybe even for the homeless guy at the corner, and those on our TVs or devices on whom the camera zooms in while horrors unfold. We feel with them. We have empathy with them. But here's the thing. The more we emphasize with those in the spotlight, the more we generalize about the others who become then enemies. We stop to think the one thing that makes us really human, And so the sad truth is that empathy and